Hello and welcome to AutoHotkey tutorial number 1. In this tutorial, I will take you on the first steps towards learning everything that you can ever want to know or need to know about creating your own scripts using AutoHotkey. These tutorials have been carefully planned out so that even if you've never done any programming before, you won't have any problems following the topics covered. The goal is that you don't only learn how to use AutoHotkey, but you understand it. Before we begin the lesson, you will need the following items. 1 is a copy of AutoHotkey installed somewhere on your computer, and 2 is some sort of text or script editor. Both of these items are free, and you can have them installed on your computer within 5 minutes if you don't already. I'm going to be using the Site for AutoHotkey script editor throughout all the tutorials, so if you would like to have an easier time following along, I recommend that you pick up the Site for AutoHotkey script editor. As a rule of thumb, I don't normally link external websites in the description. This is for your safety and for my sanity. Google is your friend. Just use Google and search up AutoHotkey, go to their site and download and install it. And then search up Site for AutoHotkey and download and install it. If you have any difficulties, in the past I have done a tutorial where I included the installation of AutoHotkey and the Site for AutoHotkey script editor. I will leave a link to that video in the description. Just click on it and watch the first few minutes and you'll see what you need to know. So, what is AutoHotkey? The simplest answer to that question is that AutoHotkey is a free open-sourced scripting language that allows you to automate virtually any process on computers that run the Windows operating software. In addition to that, you can actually create standalone programs using AutoHotkey. A question that many of you are going to probably ask sooner or later is, can I use AutoHotkey to do so and so? And I'm going to stop you right there. The answer is yes. Almost every single question that starts with, can I use AutoHotkey to do so and so, always ends up with a yes answer. If you can do it with your own 2 feet and a heartbeat, then you can use AutoHotkey to automate it. Here is the list of items that we're going to be covering in this first tutorial. I realize that it looks like a lot of items, but many of them we're going to be able to cover very quickly. I'm also going to be splitting this tutorial up into smaller parts, so that way if you don't have the time to sit down and watch the full tutorial all in one sitting, you can watch one part, come back the next day, watch another part, or whenever you can. As for the list of topics, they were selected because many of them are going to lay the groundwork for all your scripting in the future, as well as help segue into the next few tutorials which are going to cover fundamentals of programming. If you've done any programming in the past, much of the things we're going to be covering in the next few tutorials are going to be familiar to you, but different because they're going to be written within the AutoHotkey syntax. Likewise, if you haven't done any programming in the past, once you complete the fundamentals part of the tutorial series, when you move on to other programming languages, you'll find it much easier to adapt to those. Some of the other items on this list have just been chosen because they'll give us a little bit of code to play around with, because it can't be all work and no play after all, right? Okay, now that we have all that out of the way, let's actually jump into the meat of the tutorial. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new script. So those of you who opted to get the Site for AutoHotkey script editor, go ahead and open it up. You might have to play around with it a bit to get used to its controls. One of the options that I'll tell you about right away that you can change is, at least I don't like having it that way, is when you open up options, you'll have this thing called wrap. What this does is when your text reaches the edge of the screen, instead of it continuing off, it'll drop down to the next line. I personally don't like that feature, so usually I turn the wrap off. So once you have your script editor open, it'll automatically, if you don't have a previous project open already, it'll automatically create a brand new project for you. All you're going to do then is just go to File, Save As, and then pick where on your computer you want to save it. I suggest you create a folder called AutoHotkey Tutorials for these, and then inside of that you should name this particular tutorial. Here, you know what? I'm gonna create a new folder. Okay, so I have a new folder. I'm going to open that up and I'm going to create this script. I'm going to call this .ahk and save. And there we go. Now we have an executable AutoHotkey script. For those of you who opted not to get the AutoHotkey, the site for AutoHotkey script editor, what you're going to need to do is, because I don't know what you're going to be using to do it, I'm just going to show you a generic way of doing it. Like, we could even use this to do the site for AutoHotkey. What you're going to do is pick wherever on your computer you want to create your scripts. Once again, I suggest you create a folder called AutoHotkey Tutorials and create your files in there. But once you have that folder open, right click somewhere in it, go to New, and then as long as you have AutoHotkey on your computer, you should have this option to create a new AutoHotkey script. Go ahead, do that, and then change the name to whatever you want, and then edit. At the very top of that script, you're going to have these 4 lines of code. All you need to do with that is just highlight them and delete them. And that's it. Now you can follow along with the rest of the tutorial. Okay, this next part we're going to talk about the auto execute area and the persistent command in AutoHotkey. So the best way for me to start this is just basically describe how the script works. So when you execute a script, what it first does is it tells your computer how much memory it needs in order for it to run the program. So if you have variables or etc., and all your other things that are involved, it needs memory in order for it to actually run the program. So it tells your computer, hey, I need this much memory, and then it runs the program. Once the program starts, it then starts at the first line, and if there's any instructions on it, it'll complete those instructions and then move on to the next line. It'll complete those instructions and then move on to the next line. And it'll do this automatically the second you run the script, up until the point where it encounters a return or a exit or a hotkey, etc. Don't worry about those for now. We're going to come to those in a few minutes. But it's going to run all of those things the second you run the program. You don't have to do anything to get those things to do what the instructions are. So hence auto execute. What happens is, once it encounters the end of the script or a exit or a return, if we don't have that persistent command somewhere in our script, what it does is it says to the computer, okay, I am done with that memory. You can free up that memory to use for other processes that whatever you want to do. And then basically we can't rerun that portion of the script. So if we have a portion of our script that we want to run over and over again, what we need to do is have it some way to tell the computer that we don't want to release that memory. And the way we do that is by including the persistent command somewhere at the top of our script. So these commands are what we're going to call the settings. So there's a bunch of different settings that we're going to go over as we go through the tutorial series, but this will be the first one that we cover. So all we would do is we would just type in the pound sign or number sign or hashtag, however you want to call it, and then if you have the script editor, the site for AutoHotkey script editor, as soon as we start typing this in, we're going to get the option to auto-complete that. So that's what we're going to do. So now we have the persistent. So what this does is, even if we encounter that return, anything that needs to be stored in the memory up in our auto execute area, it still stays stored in the memory. One of the only items that we would actually need this persistent command for is the set timer, which is a topic that we're not going to be covering for quite a while. Now I bring this up is because many people, when you start learning these scripting languages or programming languages, you start off by copying other people's work, and a lot of the time you're not really sure about what you're copying. So let me tell you this. This persistent command, 99.9% of the time you will not need it. So if you've been using this persistent command, you're going to have your eyes opened in the next few minutes because you don't actually need it. What we're going to start off with in this first tutorial is one of the items that we're going to look at is hotkeys. Now hotkeys, by their very nature, is the program only running that particular the functionality that's built into our hotkey when you press the hotkey. And then once it's done, it waits for you to do it again. So how it does that is in the default settings that you can't see. Like there's a ton of things that we can't actually see when we do our code. There's stuff underneath the surface that we never see. Inside the defaults for all the hotkeys and a few other items, there is that persistent command already built in, because we need that persistent command in order for our hotkeys to work, because without it, it would release the memory, and then when we press our hotkey, they wouldn't do anything. So that is our portion on persistent and our auto execute area. So once again, the auto execute area is the first part of your script up until it encounters a return or a hotkey or a few other items, and it'll automatically do those instructions as soon as you launch the script. You don't have to press any hotkeys or any buttons for it to actually do those things. It launches as soon as you launch the script. It does those things. So that's our auto execute area.